Hello and welcome to OctopusDo. I'm Christian Ross, and today we're going to go a little bit boho with our project. I'm going to show you how to use leather to make an ending for a bracelet that you've made on a loom. And I'm using the Goddess Loom from Juliana Avelar, and so I hope you enjoy this project. Here's what you're going to need. First of all, you're going to need your bracelet that you've woven on the loom. Keep it on the loom so far, because I'm going to show you an easy way to do some of your gluing while this is still on the loom. The next thing you're going to need is a thin glue, such as a super glue or a bead stringing glue, something like that. I love using the GS Hypo Cement or Beadalon's bead stringing glue for that because it has a nice thin applicator. You're going to need a thicker, more flexible glue that is suitable for leather. E6000 is great. It is self-leveling, it holds well, and most importantly, remains flexible. You're going to need the type of leather that you'd like to use for the ends. I'm using this real leather, which is a 2-inch wide piece in rustic tan that I just picked up at my local craft store. You really don't need much for this project. I'm going to show you how to cut this to make the end, and I'm also going to possibly be using pieces of this to make the strings to tie this with. You're going to need a way to cut your leather. I find using a rotary cutter, such as you would use for quilting and sewing and things like that, works wonderfully. And with my rotary cutter, I am using the self-healing mat here and a ruler that I'm going to use as a straight edge guide. You're finally going to need something to punch holes in your leather. And that's going to come in the form of a leather hole punch. This is one of the options, this great plier set where you can change the size of the hole, and it has the piercing tool right there. Or you can use a drill bit with your favorite wire coiling tool, otherwise known as your drill. If you've seen that video, you know what I'm talking about. And here are just a few more things that I found while making this video really came in handy as well. So those are basically all the supplies that you're going to need to make this project. You don't need absolutely everything that you see here, but these are all things that I think will make the work a lot easier. So let's get started. The first thing that I need to do is finish off the ends of my bracelet while it's still on the loom. And I like using the selvage technique that I learned from Juliana, which means that what you do is after the last row of beads and at the beginning of the bracelet, before the first row of beads, you weave your weft thread back and forth several times so that you create almost a fabric. So you have a little bit of an end to play with here. So you can see I've woven the end of my thread back and forth so that I have a bit of what's called a selvage. And that gives me something to crimp onto if I were going to use a ribbon crimp or anything like that. And then I've just tied the end of my weft thread to a centerpiece. I don't want to tie on the end because I don't want any little threads hanging out when I'm done. The next step is after you have created the selvage on each side, you want to glue that so that it is secure. And that's what I'm saying is going to be very handy to do before you take this off the loom. I'm going to use that really thin glue that I was talking about, very liquid glue, and I apply some to the selvage. The reason I'm using a thin glue for that is because the glue seeps down into all the nooks and crannies and bonds everything together really well, as opposed to a thicker glue that's just going to sit on top. The thing that I like about the Beadalon bead stringing glue or the GS Hypo Cement is the fact that it has a precision tip. I'm going to use this to completely cover the ends of the selvage. I'm not squeezing a lot of glue out here. I'm just putting a little bit of pressure because the slightest bit of pressure is really going to get glue to start flowing out. And if you squeeze really hard, you will end up causing this to squeeze out more glue than you really want. And then make sure when you're putting the cap back on that you get that cap down in the end of the tube. So there's no sense standing around waiting for glue to dry. So I'm going to give this a chance to dry, and we'll come back and I'll show you how to take this off the loom. All right, so I've come back, well, about a pot of coffee later, so I'm guessing about 10 minutes. And my glue is dry enough for me to take this off the loom. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my bracelet off the loom and I'm going to tie the ends together a couple of strings at a time. You'll see what I'm talking about. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but a pair of sharp scissors is good to have because I'm going to use that to take my bracelet off the loom. You can also use your thread zap, beading scissors, anything else that you may have. I'm going to set this on top of my loom so you can see what I'm doing. That green wildfire on top of my green mat doesn't show up very well. So when I say I'm going to tie these together, I'm really just going to tie a couple of knots, just a few threads at a time. Doing just a simple overhand knot, and I'm not pulling tight, just like that. Once I have this where I've got just the single tie across one end, I can go back and glue this again with the thin glue if I'm worried about it coming apart, but I think I'm good at this point, so I'm not going to do that. Flip this over, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Wow, okay, I was chopping at that with my scissors for a while, but check out how well these Zuron shears work. Wow, much easier. Okay, let's go with that. So now I have both ends tied and I'm ready to move on to the next step. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut these threads close to where I've tied them. I'm going to bury these inside the leather when I glue it, so I don't have to worry about making it really neat. I just don't want any of the ends poking out the sides of the leather. Now I need to measure how wide and how long I need to cut my leather to create these ends. So my bracelet itself, from the point that the beads start to the point that the beads end, happens to be 4 3/4 of an inch long. All right, so let's do some math. So currently my bracelet equals 4 3/4 of an inch. I want it to be 6 3/4. So I need to add 2 inches. So basically, I'm going to add an inch on each side. So I'm going to move this side down to the 1 inch mark, and this will be at 5 3/4. So I know the entire thing needs to be 6 3/4 here. Now to get an inch on each side, I'm folding the leather over. I need to make each cut of the leather 2 inches so it can be folded over. Now the strip of leather is actually a little wide as well. You see when I hold this up, the bracelet end is only right there. So I make just a little mark there on my leather. That's the width of my bracelet. Now I know I need a total of 4 inches. So I need 2 2-inch pieces. So I'm going to say here and here. And I'm going to mark that on both sides because I need to connect 2 points to get a straight line. All right, let's cut our leather. So to help me line everything up, I'm going to use the graph on this board as well. So I'm going to put my mark here. Let's see, I'll come up here so you can see. So mark here and a mark there. So I know if my ruler is lined up, it should be straight. Now I have my rotary cutter that has the safety guard on it. So pull that down. And now the blade is exposed on this side. So holding this down, I'm just going to cut. All right, so got a little bit right there. There we go. Cover everything nicely. Now I've just got to cut at my 2-inch marks. So I was real smart and cut off that part before I had made my 2-inch. So I'm just going to rely pretty heavily on my grid here to make sure that I'm cutting straight. So I line up the edge of my leather there, and at 2 inches here. Have one square or rectangle. Have a good matched set. I'll test fit this. So basically, this is going to fold over and glue on there. This is a pretty thick leather. If you're using something thinner, a little bit more flexible, then you can skip this part. But since I'm using thicker leather here, I'm going to go ahead and set in this fold so that I know when I put this all together that it will fold exactly in half and the ends will meet. So what I'm going to do is press this really well, and then I'm going to find something heavy to sit on top of it. You know what? I can even use painter's tape to hold this for now. I'll be right back. I keep adding things to this supplies list, but you know, you think of things as you're working. So yeah, a little bit of painter's tape here. Line up my ends. Because we're working with natural elements here. We're not going to the store and purchasing something that's been pre-made. So there you go, I have my little leather envelope there. I don't have to cover this completely, but I'm going to go ahead and do so because I'm going to put a bit of a weight on this, and this is going to help keep the surface from being marred. Now I'm going to put some weight on this and let it set for about 10 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to take the rest of this leather strip and I'm going to cut it into the lacing I'm going to use to tie my bracelet. Always remember to close up the safety features on your tools. You know, after I've done that, I'm thinking that's not going to tie very well. Be very stiff. So I'm going to dig into my stash to see if there is some other leather or cording that I can use. It was a good thought. I'll end up using these pieces for something else. This is what I end up having left over. I think I have just a little bit from Leather Cord USA left over. Yeah, I think that'll work very well. So I'll use this. I'm gonna come back and open my little packets here and see what I have. Now we're ready to glue the ends on to our bracelet. So here's where I'm going to use the E6000. I'm going to put a post-it note under the end here to make sure I don't get glue on my table. I haven't put a hole in this yet, and so you notice I am applying this all over the inside, but not enough for it to goop out, especially the ends there. And the end here. All right, come back to my bracelet and line it up and press down. And I'm just going to use some tape to secure that while it dries. Nero, what's going on, buddy? And I do the same thing to the other side. You gonna help? I don't want you to get glued. I love you too. Hello, baby. Now we just have to let this dry. And that will give me enough time to give him some treats. Treat? Treat? Yes, okay. Okay, welcome back. You know, I look a little different because it's been a whole day. I actually looked on the back label of my E6000 and it gave the advice that it will set up, completely cure in 24 to 72 hours. So I've given this project 24 hours to set up where I glued my ends just to make sure. I know it would get dry and stick together way before then, but never hurts to take the advice on the packaging. Never hurts to read the packaging. And yeah, sometimes you need your readers for that. So let's see what everything looks like. Have a little gunk from the tape on here, but otherwise everything is looking really good. Everything has held together. The next thing that I need to do is put a hole in the ends of this to attach my ties. And oh, let's see what it looks like so far. All right, so this goes completely around my wrist with just the ends almost touching. That gives me enough room for a knot. So I'm going to measure this to get the middle. And how I'm going to do that, this is going to be cool. Let's take my Post-it note from earlier. I put the arrow there so that I know which direction is toward the bracelet. Then I just cut this out. That gives me an idea of how big my clasp is. So I know I want the hole to be in the middle, so I'm just going to fold this in half. And that gives me the center line. And I want the hole to be toward the top. I don't want it to be exactly in the center, but I'll go ahead and fold the center anyway to see where that is. So the center would be here. So if I did that, my hole in the bracelet would be right there. I actually want it more toward the top. So I want it maybe 1/3 down. So I'll get thirds, and this is just like folding a piece of paper for going in an envelope. Just folding that into thirds. So now I know where a third is, and I want to go just under that. So I'm just going to put a little hole there and use my pin to mark the spot. It's right there. And do the same thing on the other side. Here's why I don't really have the right tool for the job. You need a leather punch for this because that is going to take out the center of your leather in the punch part. It's sharp on the end and it just makes a hole. All of that's packed up right now. We're getting ready to move. Long story. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a drill bit with, I have a motor tool here that's very similar to flex shaft because my flex shaft is packed up too. And I'm going to use this to make the holes that I want. If you have a leather punch, then definitely you use that. Because I'm drilling into this, I put a piece of wood, so I'm not going to drill into my table, and turn this on, so I'll be quiet for a minute. Now I know you can't really see much from that angle, so let me hold this up to the side to show you exactly what's going on, and then I'll go back to drilling. Alright, so I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other end. Now I have holes for the ties to go through. I'm taking my leather cord from Leather Cord USA and I'm going to see how much I have on here. Looks like it's a little over a yard. So I'm folding that in half and half again. So if I use this, I will have ties that are about 10 inches long, and that's a little long for me. Let's see, let's go with 6 inches. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces of cord that are 12 inches long. Now I come in, I'm putting the 2 ends together and going through the hole I made. Like so. And that leaves the loop at the other end. So I pull this down and then go back through the loop and cinch that tight. So then do the other side. To complete this end, I can go back and I can add beads as decoration to the end of that. Or for this one, I'm just going to do a couple of knots. So tie a knot here and here. And on this side. And there we go. The way this is designed to be worn is to put it on and then tie the ends together. See how well I can do that with one hand. I think I'm going to need a friend for this one. So I ended up going with just a regular overhand knot, and I didn't pull it too tight so I can untie it when I'm ready to. And there we go. Beautiful leather ends for a boho type bracelet. I'd love to see what you make, so definitely leave me a comment in the comments below. Find me on Facebook or Instagram and shoot me a picture. I'd love to see what you make. And if you want to find out when the next videos come out, make sure that you are subscribed and click on notifications. Until next time, now you know, go make something.